Alrighty guys, let's get started on our semester exam review. Question number 1. The weather forecast in Boston last night was for the temperature to drop 3 degrees each hour. If the temperature was 7 degrees at 8, what was the temperature at midnight? Well, I have two different ways I can solve this problem. The easiest one for me is going to be to do a vertical number line, just like a thermometer. So I know if I started at 7 degrees and I went down 3 degrees each hour, that means from 8 to 9 o'clock, so from 8 to 9 I dropped 3 degrees, so that puts me at 4 degrees. And then from 9 to 10 I dropped another 3 degrees. That was from 9 to 10. That puts me at 1 degree. From 10 to 11, it dropped another 3 degrees. So that took me to negative 2 degrees. And from 11 to midnight was another 3 degrees. And that puts me at negative 5 degrees. Okay. The other way I could have done it is how many hours did I have? I had 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. So I had 4 hours times a drop of 3 degrees at every hour. So that would give me a negative 12 degrees. Okay, it's going down 12 degrees. If I started at 7 and I added negative 12, I'm going to wind up. I know that when my signs are opposite that I have to subtract their absolute values. So the absolute value of 12 minus the absolute value of 7 is 5. And 12 has the greater absolute value, so it keeps that sign, so it's negative 5. So either way I did it, I came up with negative 5 as my answer. Okay, number 2. The graph best represents the method for finding the value of which expression? Well, I'm going to look and see where I'm starting. I'm starting here at negative 1. So the first thing I can do is look at my answer choices and see, are there any that don't start at negative 1? Well, C and D don't start at negative 1, so I can cross those off. So now I just have to look over here at A and B. So this says negative 1 minus 3 plus 5. Well, if I'm subtracting a positive number, I know I'm going to the left on the number line, which means if I start at negative 1 and I am subtracting 3, I'm going to go left. And that's exactly what this graph does. This one right here says negative 1 plus 3, and that's not what my graph is showing. So my graph is showing negative 1 minus 3 plus 5. Okay, let's look at number 3. Which graph best represents the method for finding the value of 2 minus 5 plus 3? Well, I'm going to number my graphs to find where I'm going to start. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Do we have any graphs that don't start on 2? A does not start at 2. B does not start at 2. I have C that starts at 2, and I have D that starts at 2. Okay, so my equation for this one is 2, and then this one does what? It goes 1, 2, 3. This says plus 3. And then it does what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this one says minus 5. This one is 2. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Minus 5. And then 1, 2, 3. Plus 3. Now they both end up at 0, but they took a different path to get there. And which one matches this one? That's going to be D. That's the one that's got the same expression. So D is my answer for this problem. Okay. Let's go to number 4. All right, we have another temperature problem, and they've already given us a vertical number line to work with. Okay, the temperature in Grantham, New Hampshire at 2:30 was 35 degrees. By 11:30, the temperature was negative 18 degrees. So it wants to know what's the change in temperature. That's what I'm looking for, is what was the change in temperature. Okay, so if I'm looking for the change in temperature, I need my starting temperature. If I take my start temperature, subtract my ending temperature, that's going to give me my change. Okay, so if my starting temperature was 35 degrees, and I'm going to subtract my ending temperature of negative 18 degrees, that's going to give me my change. So I also know that 35, I know that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So 35 plus 18 gives me 53. Okay, well, let's check that out on a number line and see how that works. If I started at 35 degrees and I ended at negative 18, how much time do I have here? Well, if I go from 35 to 0, I went down 35 degrees. And then if I go from 0 to negative 18, I go down 18 degrees. So again, I'm going to add 35 plus 18, and that gives me a total that I went down of 53 degrees. Okay, so what was the change in temperature? The temperature dropped it dropped 53 degrees. Don't forget, degrees is your unit marker, just like inches or square units or anything like that would be on another one. If you forget that, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking 53 degrees? Are you talking about 53 elephants? Are you talking about 53 bananas? I don't know unless you tell me. Okay? So let's look at number 5. Let me zoom this in a little bit closer for you. There we go. All right, so what expression does not equal negative 7? Well, the way to figure that out is to go and just figure them all out. So let's start with A. I have negative 2 minus 5. Okay, well, I also know that that can also be written as negative 2 plus negative 5. And if my signs are the same, I just add them together and keep the sign. So 2 plus 5 is 7, and they're both negative, so my sign is negative. So that one does equal negative 7. Let's look at this one. I have 2 minus negative 5. So this means the opposite of negative 5. So this would be 2, subtracting a negative we talked about up in this previous problem. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So that would be 2 plus 5 is 7. Okay, so right now it's B, but let's check the other ones just to make sure that there aren't any more. So if I have 4 minus 11, then I know I'm going to subtract their absolute values. So the absolute value of 11 minus the absolute value of 4, okay, that is 11 minus 4 is 7, and negative 11 has the greater absolute value, right, because this is like plus negative 11, okay, so negative 11 has the greater absolute value, so it takes on that sign. So that one is negative 7. Now I have negative 16 plus 9, so this is absolute value of negative 16, oops, plus the absolute value of 9. Actually, this is going to be minus. No, it's plus. Silly me. So the absolute value of 16 is 16. When my signs are different, I subtract them. So 16 minus 9 is 7. 16 has the greater absolute value, and it's a negative sign, so that one becomes negative. So our only answer for this one is B. All right. Number 6. What's the value of the expression? The absolute value of negative 3. Remember, absolute value is distance from 0 is distance from 0. And it's always positive. Okay? So if absolute value is always positive, we know we can come over here and we can get rid of A and B because they have a negative sign. Absolute value is never negative. Okay? How far away from 0 is negative 3? It's only 3 away. So C is our answer for that one. Okay? Number 7, my 0 pairs. Do we remember what a 0 pair is? 0 pairs are opposites. That when added equals 0. Okay? So, 4 and 1/4. If I add those, do I get 0? No, I get 4 and 1/4. So that one's not a 0 pair. Negative 2/3 and 2/3. Yep, if I add those together, I'm going to get 0. 12 and negative 12. Yep. 3.2 and negative 2.3. Nope, that's not a 0 pair. 3/8 and 2 2/3. Nope, that's not a 0 pair. And 2 3/5 and negative 2 3/5. That's a 0 pair. Okay, does that make sense? Because negative 2/3 plus 2/3 equals 0. 12 minus 12 is 0. And 2 3/5 minus 2 3/5 equals 0. So those are, in fact, 0 pairs. All right, let's look at number 8. All right, the number line below shows the various locations on Hillsborough Avenue in terms of blocks from Florida. So Florida is 0. Okay. How many blocks would you walk to get from the library to McDonald's? So I need to get from the library to McDonald's. Well, if I start at the library and I'm going to go that way, how far do I go to get to Florida Street? Well, I went up positive 4 blocks, right? I went 4 blocks. And then to go to McDonald's, how many blocks did I go from 0 to 5? I went 5 blocks. 4 plus 5 equals 9. Okay, does that make sense? Cool. All right, let's go to number 9. Maria bought a 1/4 pound of ham and 5/8 of a pound of turkey. How much more turkey than ham did she buy? All right, how much more? This tells me I'm going to subtract. And then I've got to go, so 1/4 and 5/8 of a pound. So I've got to subtract those. So I'm going to take, before I can subtract fractions, I have to have my common denominator. So I've got to find my common denominator between 1/4 and 5/8. And I know that if I multiply 4 times 2, I'm going to get 8. So if I subtract, so I know that 1/4 equals 2/8. So if I take 5/8 of a pound of turkey and subtract 2/8 of the ham, that's going to give me leftover of 3/8. Okay, so how much more turkey than ham did she buy? She bought 3/8 of a pound more turkey. All right, number 10. Becca's brownie recipe calls for 3 3/4 cup of flour. If Becca wants to make a batch of brownies that is 3/5 the amount of the standard recipe, how many cups of flour will she need? Well, what she needs is 3/5 of 3 3/4. Okay? What do we know that of means? Of means multiply. Of means multiply. Okay? So I also need to convert this to a fraction greater than 1. So this will be 3/5 times, well, to convert this to a fraction greater than 1, I have to do 4 times 3, which is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. 15/4. Okay? So then I can cross cancel with this one. I'm going to grab another color so you can see what I'm doing. I can cross cancel here because I know that 5 goes into 15 3 times. So I can cross cancel that way. So now I can multiply straight across. Can you see what I just did? Let me zoom that in a little bit for you. So I cross canceled. 5 goes into 15 3 times. So now I multiply straight across. 3 times 3 is 9. And 1 times 4 is 4. So 9 1/4 is the same as, or 9/4 is the same as 2 1/4. So she needs 2 1/4 cups of flour. Okay, I forgot to circle my answer on number 9. There it is. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so find the difference in simplest form. I have 1 3/4 minus 2 1/8. Again, I've got to find that common denominator. So let's come over here where we've got a little bit more room. So I have 1 3/4 minus 2 1/8. Okay, well, I know that this is going to be negative because this number is less than this number, and if I'm taking this number away from this one, I'm going to wind up negative. But the first thing I need to do is convert these to fractions greater than 1 with a common denominator. So this actually would be 1 6/8 minus 2 1/8. Okay, so this would be 14/8, because 8 times 1 is 8 plus 6 is 14, minus 8 times 2 is 16 plus 1 is 17. And then I know my denominator is going to stay the same. So now I have 14 minus 17. I'm going to subtract these two, their absolute values, which is going to give me 3. 17 is larger, so I know it's going to be negative 3/8, which is going to be negative 3/8, which is A. Alrighty. All right, number 12, find the quotient. What does quotient tell me? Quotient means I'm going to divide. Okay, a quotient is the answer to a division problem. So if I have, so this is negative 1 4/5 divided by 2 1/4. So what I have to do is I have to convert these to fractions greater than 1. So this is going to be 1 times 5 is 5 plus 4. So this is going to be negative 9/5. divided by 9/4, right? Because 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9. But how do I divide by a fraction? Okay, remember, divide a fraction. I keep, change, flip. So this is actually the same as negative 9/5 times 4/9. Okay? And again, I can cross cancel here because I know that 9 goes into 9 one time. So 1 times 4 is 4. And 5 times 1 is 5. And it was a negative times a positive, so my answer is going to be negative. So my answer is negative 4/5. All right. Number 13. Pull this back out just a little bit. Jeff left 4/5 of a pumpkin pie in the refrigerator, and then he ate half of what was left. So what fraction of the entire pie did he eat on Saturday? Okay, so like he started, oh, I'm not very good at drawing fifths. 2, 3, 4, 5. 5? Okay, that's close enough. So we had 4/5. Okay. Now if I draw it like a picture, I have 4/5 of the pie, and then I'm going to eat half of it. So half of that is going to be that, right? So I can tell by looking at it that he ate 2/5 of the entire pie on Saturday. Okay? All right, number 14. Frank practiced basketball on 4 different days last week for 1 3/4 hours each time. How many hours did he practice last week? Well, I know he practiced 1 3/4 each time, and he practiced on 4 different days. So I have 1 3/4 times 4. I have to convert that to a fraction greater than 1. So this becomes 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So 7/4 times 4 over 1, right? Because 4, a whole number is always over 1. Here we have that cool little thing where we can cross cancel again, because I have a 4 in the numerator and the denominator. So those both go away. So I wind up with 7 over 1, or a total of 7 hours. And I can check for how reasonable that is, because 1 3/4 hours is close to 2 hours. It's 15 minutes shy of 2 hours. So 15 minutes shy of 2 hours for 4 days, that's an hour shy of 2 hours a day. So that would be 4 times 2 would be 8. If I take 15 minutes away for each of the 4 days, that takes an hour away, so I'm at 7 hours. So I know my answer is reasonable. Okay? Alrighty. So number 15, simplify. All it wants us to do is tell us what's this number. So I have 2 2/5 plus 3 2/3 minus 1 3/5. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this so I have negative 2 2/5 minus 1 3/5 plus 3 2/3. Now, I know with the commutative property, that's what tells me I can rearrange them. Now, I know here I have negative 1 2/5 minus 1 3/5. So I'm going to add these two together because their signs are the same. So I know that 2/5 plus 2/5 is 5/5. And 2 plus 1 is 3. So that's negative 3 5/5 plus 3 2/3. But wait, negative 3 5/5. Isn't 5/5 the same as 1? So this would actually be negative 4 plus 3 2/3. Okay, so if I am at negative 4 on a number line, and I go up 3 2/3, where am I going to end up? Well, I have to subtract them. I can do it in my head on a number line if I wanted to. Let's see, let's do a number line. If I'm at negative 4, negative 3, sorry guys. If I start here and I add 3, 1, 2, 3, and 2/3, blip, blip, where do I end up? I end up at negative 1/3. Okay. The other way I could do that, I'll do this in green so you can see. I can take my 4 and subtract 3 2/3. Okay, but I have to convert these to numbers I can use. So this would have to be 3 3/3 because I don't have anything to subtract the 2/3 from. Minus 3 2/3. Okay, 3/3 minus 2/3 is 1/3. And 3 minus 3 is 0. But I also know that the negative 4, that had the greater absolute value. Oops, you guys can't see that. My bad, sorry. So I come up with 1/3, but because this has to be negative, because this has the greater absolute value than this, it's negative 1/3. Either way I do it, I come up with negative 1/3. Okay? All right, so let's look at number 16. I have 4/9 plus 5/8, or minus 5/8 plus 5/8. Well, now wait a minute. If I go back and think about what I did earlier with 0 pairs, I have negative 5/8 plus 5/8. Isn't this right here a 0 pair? This is a 0 pair. And if that's a 0 pair, it cancels each other out. So my answer for this one is 4/9. Yes, it's really that easy. Yes, you're overthinking it. Stop that. Math makes sense. Stop overthinking it. Okay, let's do number 17. Okay, number 17. This is determine the sign of the product of each expression, which means I'm multiplying, right? Product means multiply. Okay, I also have my sleeping man. Okay. I did sleeping man backwards. That's not sleeping man. Sleeping man has his eyes closed and his mouth open. Did it backwards. So, I know that a negative times a negative, because if I cover up my two eyes, a negative times a negative is going to leave me with a positive. So if I have 2 negatives, then my answer is going to be positive. If I have 1 negative and a positive, I'm going to wind up with a negative. So if I have an even number of negative signs, my product is positive. Okay? If it's an odd number of negative signs, product is negative. So all I have to do is count my negative signs, right? So this one I have 1, 2, 3, 4 negative signs. So my answer is going to be what? It's going to be positive because I have an even number of signs, so that one's positive. Okay, let's look at this one. I have 1, 2, 3. 3 is an odd number, so my answer is going to be negative. And for this one, positive, negative, negative, negative. I have 3 negatives. So if I have 3 negatives, it's going to be a negative. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, guys. Okay. All right. The low temperatures for the first week of January in Minneapolis, Minnesota were -8, -8, -11, -10, 4. Just give me a calculator. Just give me the calculator. -8, -11, -10, 4, -20, -23, and 5. What's the average daily low temperature for that week? It's really, really cold, and that's why we live in Florida, because burr. Just saying. So to find the average, I'm going to add all my numbers up. And divide by the number of numbers. So I'm going to add -8 plus -11 plus -10 plus 4 plus -20 plus -23 plus -5. So I'm going to say -8 plus -11 plus -10 plus 4 plus -20 plus -23 plus 5. I'm going to add all of those together, and then I'm going to divide them by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so let's see what we come up with. So if I have -8 plus -11 plus -10 plus 4 plus -20 plus -23 plus 5. That gives me 63. And I'm going to divide that by 7. Look at what these sneaky little boogers did. If you weren't paying attention, you're going to come up with 63. And you're going to go, oh, that's my answer. Don't forget to divide by 7. Divided by 7, -63 divided by 7 is -9. Okay, so my answer for this one is B. All right, number 19, evaluate. This is another one of those words that you guys freak out about. Evaluate -5x squared if x is -2. All that means, guys, is you're going to come over here and you're going to put -5 times my x is -2 squared. That's all that means. That's all you have to do. So this becomes -5 times, what is -2 squared? Well, -2 times -2 is +4. So my answer is -20, because -5 times 4 is -20. Okay? All right, number 20. What is the value of the expression negative 1/3 cubed? Well, that means negative 1/3 times negative 1/3 times negative 1/3. Okay, so that means negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1 over 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. That's it. That's all there was to it. All right, make sure you've marked any questions that you have on 1 through 20, and we'll go through those later on in the week.